you're sick of it yet, but it's going to get worse. It's going to get so much worse. It's going to get so much worse and more intense. But also the most important part of doing what we do is the journey. And along the journey, you meet people that change your life. And you also somehow, for some reason, they let you impact theirs. You guys know who Alicia Duncan is. If you haven't, you clearly haven't been listening to anything I've been doing over the past 2 years. You clearly have not been paying attention. So let me remind you very quickly of who this absolutely beautiful and incredible, brave, courageous soul is. This is the daughter of Donna Duncan, and one of the daughters of Donna Duncan, who has stood up so courageously in the face of loss and grief to fight up against the euthanasia and MAiD overreach in the Canadian government and the Canadian healthcare system due to the fact that they so emboldenedly took their mother from her. I do encourage you. Alicia was just saying something to me that it did not dawn on me until she mentioned it. We did an episode almost a year ago to the date where we, for the first time, sat down in my friend's studio. I was so gracious for Silvercore Studio to let me use their studio at the time to bring her in to sit down and have a conversation for her to tell her mother Donna's story. In saying that, welcome back, Alicia.
Well, thank you so much for having me, my dear friend. I can call you that now.
You can call me your stalker too. It's your choice. I'm here for either or, but most importantly,
okay with both.
I'll take both. But it's truly the wildest ride. You never know who you're going to meet along these journeys, and it's the biggest, cheesiest saying in the world. It's not about where you're going. It's about the journey. And this journey has been a wild one. And I've been blessed to walk alongside of it with you. And the moment I knew your story and your family story and your mother's story, it became incredibly clear that I was no longer allowed to avoid the subject as much as I wanted to. It is not the easiest to have conversations and live and sleep and eat and breathe in, but it is something you've become incredibly well-versed in. So tell me a little bit about, give us a quick overview of your mom for people who have not heard the episode with Alicia. You guys can go back and listen to, and then let's see where we have come since then.
Amazing. Well, I'm Alicia Duncan, and my sister Christy and I, we learned about what MAiD was days before my mom actually ended her life through it. And that was in October of 2021. She suffered a concussion in a minor car accident in February of 2020. And over the next 18 months, her health deteriorated while doctors were unable to figure out the root cause of it. And she became so desperate for any sort of reprieve that she chose to die. And so here we are. My sister and I, after her passing, we gained access to her complete medical records. As her executor, I was able to go through, and we noticed gaps in basically how the law is written around medical assistance in dying and what her actual diagnoses were. We presented that to the police, and it launched the first investigation into a MAiD death in Canada. From that point on, we really just started pushing to the media, talking about this. We knew we couldn't be the only ones, and we were right. We're not the only ones, and it's just become a much bigger thing. Since then, we have spoken in Parliament twice, and we've been featured in major documentaries with BBC, Rebel News. Kelsey and I have been actually in a few of these together, and other series with Unveil Studios. And yeah, I guess that's kind of it in as short, tight little ball as possible.
Isn't it wild when you think about it? You think about being in shows or documentaries and you go, oh, it's going to be something beautiful and lighthearted. Instead, it's us just rambling about the government deciding to abuse its healthcare system and decide that we should be utilizing euthanasia and MAiD as a treatment option instead of a last resort. And this morning I had a conversation with Amanda Ackman, and the reason I want to bring it up is because I want to touch on a couple things that I was going through on one of her papers. And the reason I want to touch on some of these things is because I learned, really quickly after just not only reading more and more and more and more, but really starting to understand the history behind things like eugenics and the euthanasia and just whatever kind of desensitizing word. Excuse me, I gotta do this with carbonated water every time. I just don't learn. I learned that, and I have learned that eugenics is something that has happened for hundreds of years. And it has been something that it feels like every 100 years, it kind of comes back around into society, which is about around the same amount of time as it takes for a human being to no longer exist on the face of the earth. And it somehow weasels its way back into society as a treatment option or a way to deal with the sick and the dying, or just the mentally ill and the disabled. And today we went through one of her papers that looked at these programs and the medicalization of murder, desensitization through medical training, as well as the industrialization of death and the psychological conditioning of executioners. And what was really super obvious to anybody who has two eyes and can read is that when you read this specific paper that I'm gonna note into the bio, it is terrifyingly clear that the verbiage that is used and how it is being used to desensitize a population is insanely similar to how the Canadian healthcare system is utilizing their control and reach over the mentally ill, over the disabled, over individuals who are unable to look after themselves and or who are just struggling so badly that they don't actually want to die, but they just want the suffering to stop. And it feels to me, and always has, like your mother never wanted to die, but she just wanted the pain to stop.
Yeah, totally. And I think something else that we could kind of talk about in the subject is the fine line between persuasion and coercion and how they both exist on a spectrum. And for me, just knowing what I know about my mom is that she was such an independent person and really prided herself on those things. And when her independence was taken away from her, I think it was almost like this, the way that the society views people that are dependent, they view them as being less worthwhile. And I think it really was subtle coercion that my mom felt that it was almost she had a duty to die because she didn't want to be a burden on her family, on her partner. And yeah, I do think about this a lot. And I think, looking back on history, we have seen this pattern as well where, families would be convinced to send their disabled children away and they were euthanized. Yeah, it's a very scary parallel for sure.
Yeah, the Hardiman Castle is actually the specific space that we discussed today. And the Hartman Castle is it was exactly what it was supposed to be for well before World War II, which was a place for the disabled children. And once the Nazis came in, they took it over, they turned it into that facility. And that actually, Jews were not allowed to be killed there. It was literally for everyone else. Jewish people were not allowed to be executed there. That was these types of euthanasia programs and lethal injection, as it stated, was only utilized for German and Austrian citizens. And it was very, very specific toward the eliminating the disabled or the problem eaters. And this is when the modern eugenics conversation comes up, because we are seeing things in Canada and the US and across the globe that mimics the idea of better babies and a fitter family. You see that conversation happening in 2022 with the College of Physicians, head of the College of Physicians discussing the infanticide of 0 to 1, which is a wild conversation to hear any sort of individual who is in a place of power, who is training the next doctors of our generation, to discuss that it might be a viable option to be considering 0 to 1. The other thing that I want to discuss, because the way that Canada works around this program is the wording is very loose. There are no safeguards. It's very up for interpretation. And on this week's episode with Alex Schadenberg, we discussed mature minors. And what it was really wild to me is understanding that mature minors doesn't actually have an age. Mature minors is subjective. It does not have an age. It can be somebody even younger than 12. The doctor has to deem the mindset of the individual which is an insane concept because we don't allow you to get a tattoo. We don't allow you to drive till you're 16. You're not allowed to vote till you're 18. But if somebody is deemed by a doctor that you are a mature minor, age doesn't matter. It is the mindset. Hey everyone, this episode is brought to you by Row Nutrition. If you guys have not heard of them, please stop what you're doing right now. Go over to their website at Row Nutrition and take a look, because you guys know more than ever, I care so deeply about my mental well-being, my physical, and my TBIs. I do everything I can to look after my body, whether that's cold plunge, ketones, or otherwise. But Row Nutrition is my newest additive, and I have to tell you, I am feeling like money. Let's talk about it. If you're struggling with brain fog, you are slower to recover at times and you're feeling more down, even if you feel like you're doing everything right, like I was doing, this is what you need. Let's talk about why. The reality is, when you hit your 30s, I'm going on 36, your body's NAD levels, a critical molecule that fuels your energy recovery and brain clarity, they drop by half, nearly half. No wonder we're all burnt out. And that's exactly why I partner with them. They use a liposomal NAD. And let me be completely straight up with you and honest, it's incredible. Normally, you need to go and get NAD IVs for this result, but not with Row. I am experiencing sustained clean energy, sharper focus, which we all need, and faster recovery. I don't have any jitters. I don't have any crashes. And this is an energy like others that keep me performing my best. It's critical. Let's talk about NAD in general. It fuels your mitochondria. If you guys don't remember high school science, that's what we're talking about. That is the powerhouses in your cells responsible for your energy and clarity. And like I said before, the only real way to get it before was really expensive, uncomfortable, which I've done, IV treatments. But Row Nutrition has completely changed the game with their new technology. No needles, no downtime, just maximum absorption and results. I have felt the change, and you guys know I only use products that I actually use. So I want you guys to go and give this one a try. It's risk-free. So it is backed by their 60-day money-back guarantee. And I believe in this enough to give you guys 20% off. So go head over to rownutrition.com/discount/Kelsey20 and use your code Kelsey20 at checkout. Now, the one thing I want you to understand is that when you do this, you're not just doing this for you. You're doing this for everyone else around you, because when you feel good, others around you start to feel just as good as well. So go check them out.
Yeah, and definitely. I mean, obviously, I've thought about this a lot. We've talked about this a lot. And I think one of the really concerning things is that, medical autonomy, this is really what we're talking about here, is that, everything that the pro-MAiD activists are talking about is complete autonomy. Everyone deserves complete autonomy over their own body, and specifically for children. Laws were brought in for specific reasons. For example, there's a lot of cultural groups and religions that don't believe in blood transfusions. And say in the circumstance where a child would be in a car accident, they required a blood transfusion, the parents wouldn't give permission for that and the child would die. And so I do understand why a child in that case would be allowed to have autonomy over their own body for a life-saving measure. But now that same argument is being used in reverse and saying that a child should be able to make a decision to end their life. And we're also seeing this in other, in other areas of medical care. And I don't really want to delve into, transgender things today, but it is really tough because a parent can no longer protect their child. And when we're talking about irreversible decisions such as death, there in California this past week, there was a person, I can't remember his name, I can find you the information, but he specifically went out and said that parents or family members who go against someone whose application for euthanasia, they should be criminally charged. And which really hit close to home, because that was me. That's my sister and I did everything we legally could do in the 48 hours we had before my mom died to try to stop it. And obviously we weren't successful, but we did keep her alive for 4 more days. I digress, but again, Yeah, going back to the children and youth, it is really concerning, because we do know there is science that a child's brain isn't fully developed sometimes until the age of 25. And I just know how easily I was influenced when I was younger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I there we don't have to touch the trans issue, but it is important to touch the sterilization issue, and I'll tell you why. Because this is something that it's a very this is no different than what they did. So these facilities that were designed for euthanizing children and euthanizing those that were troubled eaters were also doubled as a sterilization facility. So it is no different than puberty blockers for youngs and sterilizing them prior to puberty as it is to what they did then. We are sterilizing and euthanizing the same way they sterilized and euthanized. And somehow there is this idea that we cannot be repeating history when it's very clear in their own verbiage. And smarter people than me have stated this. It is identical. It is not a subject of euthanasia, your right to die, your death with dignity. It is called eugenics. This is modern eugenics. And you want to take it a step further and directly correlate it to the Hardeman Castle. When you walk in the facility, the numbers are the same as Canada's current numbers. So from 41 to 42, it was over 15,000 people were euthanized there. In 2023, Canada euthanized 15,341. It is no fucking different. It is identical. The words are identical. The people who qualify are identical. And the fact that what we are seeing right now in the UK is the expansion bill that they are attempting to put into place right now that will include these people, who will include veterans, that will include the disabled and dying. And part of the problem with that is not that it's being even looked at. It's that the current sitting prime minister of the UK is a known eugenicist, a known documented eugenicist who is pushing this bill so hard for I'm not sure what reason, the same way that our current liberal government has been pushing it to expand. And the only reason they didn't was because of the amount of noise in 2021 that was generated by people like you in order to stop it, because bad press stopped that bill dead in its tracks, and it's not completely over. So why don't you help others to understand why this is not as simple as like, let's just leave it alone, it's for terminally ill. 2027 is not far from us.
I know, exactly. Well, and I think that's one of the things, like I have written to the UK Parliament. They're not accepting any evidence from Canada, just so you know.
Oh, I'm aware.
They rejected it. Yeah, you know. So the problem is, and I'm not just making this up, because people sometimes say like, oh, that would never happen. But when it became law in 2016 in Canada, for a person to access assisted suicide, it was for terminal conditions, only for someone who is facing imminent death. And what happens is anytime something is legalized, you open the door for that to be challenged. And that's exactly what happened. So in 2021, that law was challenged, and it basically said that, well, you maybe don't have to be terminal, but maybe you have a condition that is incurable and you are suffering intolerably, because who's to say that your suffering isn't as bad as someone who's in a terminal state and facing death imminently. And so that law was passed, and then that law was challenged further and just said, well, who are you to say that someone who has a mental illness that's also an incurable condition, just because it's not a physical suffering, they suffer the same way. And this is why it continues to be expanded. This is why it's continuing to be expanded for mature minors. They say it's for mature minors only with a terminal condition with parental consent. But guess what? That's going to get challenged again. There's going to be a child who's going to say, well, I have an incurable condition, and so why don't I have the same rights because I have medical autonomy the same way that an adult does? Absolutely, that's going to get legalized. And then it's going to happen for a child up to the age of 12 with a mental illness. This is just how it continues to roll. And so for people in the UK to say, well, we have very strict safeguards, they don't. I've reviewed the proposal of the bill, of the terminal ill bill, and the wording is very similar to Canada. And they should be looking at Canada as an exact example of what not to do because there are ambiguous terms. It can be interpreted in many different ways. And this is how we see in Canada people who have hearing loss, have PTSD. Essentially, if you were over the age of 18 in Canada currently, you can be approved. And people are dying right now with mental illness, as my mom was, because they also have a physical condition. So there's loopholes around this, and it's really, really difficult for me to listen to people say, well, that would never happen, because it is happening currently. And we just need to open our eyes.
Well, we already have an individual who is not far from myself and other people who was severely depressed with hearing loss, and he was able to access MAiD. And I am also 100% disabled as of last week, and I am somebody who wears hearing aids. So by definition, this same individual was killed with the same ailments that I currently have. So you can't tell me it's not happening. And we have this desensitization of our societal population around eugenics and around the idea of the right to die. And a really great example, I think, to look at is the Tracy Latimer case. Right? So Tracy Latimer was a young girl with a severe disability who was 12 years old, and she had cerebral palsy and was in chronic pain from the repeated surgeries. And she was gassed by her own father in a truck in Saskatchewan. Okay. And the thing that we have to understand is that people are going to do this, but you also have to know that when this story came out, nothing positive was ever said about that child. All it was ever said was that they should be allowing the father to live, and they should be proud of him, and that he did the right thing. And when you have people like the CBC writing stories like this, praising the father for gassing his own daughter while he watched through the window of the truck, it echoes the same thing as the Hadamar Castle when they stood in the window and perfected down to the second as they euthanized people with cerebral palsy and mental illnesses and difficult eaters. And they praise those same people the way they praise these same people. And it's no different. The only different is the year that it happened. When you're desensitizing populations slowly by things like Simon's Department Store and people coming onto our clips, which you're probably going to get as well. And we're seeing it time and time again saying that would never happen. You're a fucking liar. When we have mountains of evidence and proof, and the audacity of them to say that that would never happen when it happened to your own mother. And brought to you by Ketone IQ. If you guys have not heard or seen me drinking these little bottles right here, you have been missing out. These guys right here are single-handedly the biggest part of my routine. Outside of the functional mushrooms, the movement, the sleep, the hydration, Ketone IQ is a number one most important tool that I use in my toolbox. And let me tell you why. If you guys have never experienced runner's high, give this a try. That flow state, it is for real. Ketones are a uniquely powerful macronutrient that can cross the blood-brain barrier, and they increase the brain energy efficiency. And every time you take a Ketone IQ, you're going to notice the radical boost in performance, endurance, and just focus in general. For me, I use this when I road bike, when I run. As a mother, instead of using caffeine after 12 o'clock, I go and grab a ketone. More importantly, I use it before I podcast, before I do keynotes or anything important in my life. You will see a ketone in my bag, on the table, or anywhere near me. So do yourself a favor. Once you're done listening to this awesome episode of the Kelsey Sharon Perspective, go on over to the website partner.ketone.com/Kelsey. You're going to save, go grab yourself a subscription so you never miss out and you always have the energy you need. Hey guys, this episode is brought to you by Good Living. I am so excited to tell you about something that's become such a meaningful part of my wellness routine, Good Living. Now, this isn't any brand. This is actually a brand I know all of the owners behind. And let me tell you, their integrity, their dedication, and their quality is the real deal. Their microdosing and functional blends are crafted with intention, and you can feel it. Everything is tested and made to support you in tapping into your own rhythm. We're talking about blends for anxiety, depression, and stress, ADHD, brain health, inflammation, sleep, and energy. Seriously, they have thought of everything possible. I know firsthand how much love they pour into every single product. So if you're ready to check them out and explore more, go to itsgoodliving.com. And trust me, it's a journey worth taking. That's itsgoodliving.com, itsgoodlivin.com. And make sure to use the code BRASS and get 20% off your first order today. And brought to you by XXXY Athletics. You guys can check them out at xx-xyathletics.com and make sure you use the code Kelsey20. That will help you save. I'm so excited to be a new ambassador of XXXY. I absolutely love what they stand for, and I'm proud to work with them because they are founded on truth, dedication to quality, and they are built for style and performance. Women deserve the opportunities that sports and single sex spaces provide because sex matters at the end of the day. It is the single biggest determinant of athletic performance. And it's completely unfair and dangerous, as most of you know, to allow males who are XY chromosome to compete with girls and women who are XX in sports. You guys can share your stories just by doing the hashtag workout speak out. Tag myself, Kelsey_Sharon, and the XX_XY athletics on Instagram, and we will share everything. We need to get fit and speak our minds, mobilize into a force that fights back for women's sports. So start fighting. The way that you do that is go to XX-XY Athletics, go use the code Kelsey20 at checkout, slap on that gear, signal to the world that you are done allowing others to walk into female spaces. I believe in this brand. I believe in the mission. I believe in what they do. So go grab some now.
Yeah, it's I think because it's such a nightmarish situation to ever imagine yourself in, people would say, well, that would never happen to me, or I would do something differently. My mom was a highly educated, experienced psychiatric nurse. She lived a beautiful, happy, healthy life. She was very involved in my life and my children's life. And it was a minor car accident that changed the trajectory of her life. If it could happen to my mom, it could happen to anyone. And we are just speaking out about it. There are dozens of people that have reached out to me that don't want to speak publicly about it because mental illness is still is stigmatized, I think, in our culture and our society. But so many people have received phone calls from a doctor saying your parent is dead, or your sister is dead. And that's because legally in Canada, you don't have to notify your family that this is something that you're doing. The only reason we found out about it before my mom died is because she told us.
Right.
And, what I want to say to people that are listening to this that think that this could never happen, or they're concerned, is that I want people and I want politicians to think about what happens down the road. If you don't have children now, maybe you will, or maybe your sister or someone you know has a mental illness and you get a call from them and they say, I want you to be by my bedside on Wednesday because I'm going to die. What would you do if you were legally not allowed to do anything to stop that? If you could actually go to jail for trying to stop this? What would you do in that position? Would you stand up and would you fight? Or would you just say that this is okay because that's what society has been telling us for so long? It's a subtle coercion, kind of back to what I was talking about in the beginning. It's like an abusive relationship, when someone starts dating a person initially in an abusive situation, they love bomb them. They're typically this narcissist who tells them everything that they want to hear. And then slowly over time, it's a slow drip. And this abuse becomes normalized. And so you don't see it. And it's hard to get away from it. And in that same way, this is how I feel like our society is with medical assistance and dying. It's this slow drip that we're being fed. And it's almost like the only way to die in a dignified way now is to be euthanized. Like, I don't understand, like, whatever happened to conversations with palliative care or hospice or, end of life doulas that are now emerging. I recently went through my training to really bring back dignified natural death, because what about those conversations and the closure that you have in that end period? It's being taken away. There's many ways to have a dignified death, and it doesn't have to be through euthanasia.
Well, also the other thing too that's really important to highlight is Canada will not allow us to have legal access to regulated psychedelic assisted therapy like psilocybin, which is proven to help end of life anxiety, which is proven to help handle the traumas that come with knowing that you are passing. But yet, the first thing they will offer you is euthanasia.
I know. And furthermore to that is that doctors are now actually mandated to bring up euthanasia, MAiD, as a treatment option. And if they refuse to assess, they must refer. And they're actually mandated now. They're at risk of losing their medical license if they don't. It has become so intertwined in our healthcare system that people are now afraid to go to their doctors because they don't know if their doctors are going to help them to live or help them to die. And it's really terrifying for vulnerable populations.
Well, and I think that's valid fear, and that's not fear mongering. If any sort of medical practitioner is now mandated to tell you you have to do something, and this has happened in a very, very short period of time, you need to look at the motive behind this time. You can say it's depopulation, go down the conspiracy route. You can say it's cost saving measures, which is not a conspiracy, is actually provable on paper. I mean, God, I got to stop doing it. Every time we look at things like cost saving measures, one of the biggest things that comes up in Dr. Christopher Lyon's most recent paper is the cost saving measures. And if you take it a step further, out of the 1,800 doctors that are providing MAiD in Canada, 338 are the large majority, meaning that subset of people, over 300 people, are the doctors that are killing over 15,341 people last year, in 2023 alone, which states that the disproportionate amount of people who are taking lives. And you can start to see direct correlations with things like Dr. Christopher Lyon's paper on healthcare serial killers. When you give somebody a position of power, when you give them a right to have a private conversation where they state, you do not have to tell your loved one, you do not have to inform anyone, and this, if they don't say yes to you, that's okay. We will protect you, and we will protect your right to die. When you have people that are predators, because do not get it twisted, people can be predators. People like Ellen Wiebe and Stephanie Green are predators on our society. Cam Map are predators on the Canadian healthcare system. And somehow they have weaseled their way into somewhat getting doctors mandated to offer this as a treatment option. And when you say the word treatment, let's remember, treatment is supposed to be something that fixes you, not ends your life. And like Alex Schadenberg says all the time to me, Kelsey, dead people don't complain.
That's right. Well, and that's exactly it. I was thinking about that earlier when we were speaking about the people that are abused in other systems. They, years down the road, we're talking about, the hormone blockers that have sterilized people, and they're speaking out now saying that how wronged they feel because of what they went through. Well, they have a voice, but if you're dead, you can't talk. Right. And I would love actually to talk more about the healthcare serial killer aspect, because Christopher Lyons, his father, also was killed by MAiD, and I do consider him to be a dear friend of mine. We speak all the time, and he is one of the most brilliant humans I have ever met, and I am just so proud of him for everything that he's doing. He has written numerous peer-reviewed articles on the subject, and there are patterns that healthcare serial killers have that are similar to serial killers. They're just being allowed to do it legally through the healthcare system. And
Mm-hmm.
there really is no governing body that's reviewing these doctors. These doctors aren't going through psychological evaluations prior to being allowed to take people's lives over and over and over again. And furthermore, they're self-governing, these doctors
Mm-hmm.
as well. So there's no recording of the procedure so they can follow up. And like we just said, the dead person who is the patient can't complain afterwards if it didn't go smoothly or if they didn't follow the procedures. And the family often isn't even there because they don't even know that it's happening. And Ellen Wiebe, who is one of the most prolific killers in Canada, she has said, when asked recently in an article, like, have you ever made a mistake? And she says, no, I've not. I've not made a mistake. Sometimes she doesn't totally agree with what the patients are doing because she feels that they have a longer life, but according to her, they meet the legal requirements, and so she will kill them. But that's not true. She has messed up, and
Right.
she 2 years ago ended a man's life who was on a day pass from a psychiatric unit in Vancouver. His family has now pressed criminal charges. She hasn't been convicted, but this is ongoing right now. The family just filed in December, about a month ago. Also recently, in this past October, a woman was stopped from being killed hours before her death. Ellen Wiebe was going to kill her because the family was able to prove in court in an emergency hearing that she shouldn't be legally approved because she had a mental illness, which
Right.
isn't legal yet. So I think this just really goes to show you that a lot of these doctors do think that they are above the law. They're acting outside of the law and they're protected. Even if a doctor is found to be criminally negligent, which, to be clear, has never happened in Canada, even if they are, they get a slap on the wrist.
Right.
That's written into code. They will serve very little jail time, if any. Maybe they'll get their license taken away. It's just absolutely terrifying how far it's come and how little people are looking at this topic and how concerning it is.
Well, it's again, this goes back to the correlation. What I found really fascinating this morning about my conversation with Amanda, and I love that you just brought up the case with the individuals that stayed at St. Paul's at the psych ward there on the day pass, because we were having this conversation about where the Nazis were trained in Germany through the psychological training. And they put them in this location that was above and higher than everybody else. Like, not just facetiously, they were in a structural building that was above everybody else. I find that ironic considering the Willowbrook Clinic is on West Broadway and above everybody else. There's just some of these correlations that you could say are coincidental, and some to me that just look like it's too obvious and it's just too in front of your face. It's so damn covert, it's overt. And that's what's wild to me with Ellen Wiebe in particular too, because these doctors have what are called oh my goodness, privileges in different locations. Yet this specific doctor seems to do it in the same location. It's like, when you think of serial killers, it has to be more than two people in different locations. She does it in the same place over and over and over and over again. And it's because that becomes a sanctuary and safety where she knows she won't be, no one will bother her. And the case that you brought up, and I'm glad that you did, because we've brought it up several times now on a lot of different shows, and it's important to address. That individual was only saved because you took time out of your day to help them walk through the process, her common law partner walk through the process, because you have been through the process and you were able to help him get him to an injunction point, which is so important because it shows that when people ask and email, and like the client I just had before this called specifically to say, how do I stop this? How do I help? How do I make a difference? And so when people say that I don't know how to make a difference, there is plenty of ways that you can make a difference in this process. And when people like Ellen Wiebe approve somebody over one Zoom session who has a history of bipolar cycling too, you have to look at things like safeguards, because it shows clearly there cannot be safeguards if doctors are able to approve you for death without even checking your blood pressure.
I mean, that's exactly how my mom was approved. She was
Right.
initially approved over a phone call. One of her assessors did see her in person, but because my sister and I were fighting to stop it in courts, they did have a third assessment, and it was done also over the phone. I think that is pretty alarming. I can't get a prescription for antibiotics for an ear infection without seeing a
No.
doctor in person.
Right.
So I think that that's so alarming. And I mean, it's ironic that a doctor would be concerned about the effects of an antibiotic um, without seeing me in person, but they aren't concerned about prescribing drugs that will stop their heart.
Well, it's wild too, because one of the things that we've now noticed in the 2023 provincial reports is the pharmaceutical prescribed drug numbers are not matching the death certificates.
Alarming.
It's alarming. It's alarming to say the
Mm-hmm.
least. And Quebec is unwilling to discuss. I talked to Amanda about this. The MPs are unwilling to discuss Quebec's advanced order requests that are now coming through, which have not been, by the way, federally approved at all. And to take it a step further, every single drug that is used, that is listed in the NIH under the Canadian MAiD kits, which, yes, does include a paralytic, regardless of how you feel about what I say, under the NIH again, NIH, you guys can go look it up. It does state what's in the Canadian MAiD kits, although doctors are not required to use those MAiD kits. It does state a paralytic, and in these MAiD kits that are supposed to be prescribed, the numbers aren't matching. But when you come to the Quebec numbers, they're the fastest growing in the globe for death. And one of the things that concerns me the most about this is it is a self-reporting system, and the self-reporting system means they fill out the documents, which means things like your mother's healthcare records. Where are we at with getting access?
Um, so I am currently in the middle of an inquiry process or inquiry with the Privacy Commission. I've been actively trying to get access to my mom's MAiD assessment records for over 2 years. So just to be clear, the assessment records, for some reason, do not form part of the medical records, even though they're both under the umbrella of the healthcare system. So I don't understand why that is. Because I am my mom's executor, I was given her medical records to review. Again, I mentioned that that's how my sister and I were able to build a case for the police investigation. But the police also were unable to get access to my mom's MAiD assessment records. The health authority refused to give them to the police as well. And the Privacy Commission did uphold that decision. I have now, along with my sister, spent over $40,000 with the top law firm in Canada. And now we're going through an inquiry process, waiting for the adjudicator to make a decision on whether or not we can have access. To be clear, my only intent to get these records is to prove whether or not my mom's death was legal, which is in her best interest. I am being toted for finding out why she died, or my own curiosity for my own needs. And that has nothing to do with my reasoning for wanting to get these records. I know why she wanted to die. It was because she couldn't get access to healthcare.
Right.
She told me, because I met with her once a week to care for her. We were super close. I have access to her full medical records. There's nothing more that I could know. I just want to know, did the doctors follow the procedures that they are legally required to do? And they won't let me see.
It's
Why is
because
that? We know the answer, but
we
just
know
think about
why.
that, the listeners,
Yeah.
like, think about what could the reasoning be for them not wanting to let me see these records. Because to be clear, if they wanted me to see them, they have every authority to give them to me.
Right.
I know this because other family members whose parents have died that have contacted me have sent me their parents' assessment records because they asked for them and they were
Mm-hmm.
given the records to them to review. I've seen other people's MAiD assessment records, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm not allowed to have them. And I will tell you why. It's because I am speaking publicly about it, and they know what my intent is. My intent is to criminally charge the doctors that fucked up,
Right.
and I'm being punished. And that's exactly what's happening. I mean, it should be very concerning if the police can't get access to these records. they've basically said, and this is a tongue twister, I do not have enough evidence to prove that the evidence that I'm looking for is in the evidence that I seek. If we can say that again, I don't have enough evidence. I have her full medical records. I have everything possible, but I can't get it. The police can't get a production order. So why?
It's staggering at the amount of people that are dying by euthanasia right now. But the fact that they're fighting so tooth and nail to keep you away from these medical records should tell them that it makes them look more guilty than it does anything else.
Absolutely. I mean, the fact that they have denied me these records and that the police investigation closed because they wouldn't give this record tells more of a story than if I actually got them in the first place.
Right.
Because, and let me say this too, because our laws are so poorly written, it just has to be in the opinion of the doctor. And it just has to be this, the chances of me even proving criminal negligence, even if I do get the records, is very, very slim.
Right. But it's not impossible.
So it's not impossible, but they must have really fucked up.
Yeah. Well, it's obvious when somebody attempts to kill themselves and it is in a psych ward and held because they just attempted to kill themselves, and then a few days later the hospital killed them.
Yeah.
I mean, this isn't rocket science. And this is something that is making international news. It has been for years, but finally, and I mean finally, and I'm going to say this with all due respect to Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, because I do believe, just like our border concerns that could have been fixed years ago, but because of somebody else putting their foot down and putting real threats in, some actual action is going to happen. But what's really concerning to me is that it's taking this long. It's taking this long for people and our politicians, because don't fucking get it twisted. They're still politicians. I don't care that they're speaking up now. You can say better late than never, but no. And I'll say no, because like WV and MV, and the fact that they've had to spend their entire life savings in Alberta trying to keep their own daughter alive, which could have been stopped and put dead in its tracks when it happened by the premier. But now that it's garnering international attention, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith on the John Bachman show said recently that she is now concerned. Publicly, she's now stating she's concerned that 1 in 20 almost 1 in 20 deaths are MAiD deaths in Canada. And that she is concerned that people are overusing the system. She even admits on national television that those people are using it for things like homelessness and for struggling with things like mental illness. It's absolutely, listen, I'll high five you for finally saying it out loud. I'll give you that. But why did it have to take years after the expansion for you to realize that maybe 10,000 people is not an acceptable number? What about the 15,000 in 2023 that was not acceptable? What about the numbers we're going to see an increase in 2024? Why is it taking till 2025 for the premier of a province, with now multiple people who have doctor shopped them way out of the province to other provinces like British Columbia, to stand up and say something? And I'll tell you why. Because people like you who are so damn relentless and so fucking loud that it's getting the attention, and this is why. But I'm not going to go and high five these premiers and these prime ministers who have known about it, and not only known about it, prime ministers like Justin Trudeau who have written and brought it from the prime minister's office to include MAiD to be offered to veterans for years. I'm not going to high five you now for protecting our borders after we've needed it for years. You're only doing it because you've been threatened. So stop it.
Yeah, I don't know anything about the border war, so I'm not going to get into that,
Don't even use the word war, because it's not a border war. Let me make this emphatically clear, because I do know a lot about it. It's not a border war. It's called symptoms of inaction. And that's all it has ever been.
Right. So aside from that, I actually do want to commend. I do think it is a little bit late for any premier to be jumping on the bandwagon now, but this is how the system works, Kelsey, is that the politicians do what we tell them, and they do what they know is going to get the votes. And this has become such a big issue. I do
Now we
always
get
think
the votes.
yeah, I do always think that there's an ulterior motive for everything. You know, there's an ulterior motive for me doing what I do. It's so I can make sense of something so senseless, and it helps me grieve. You know, that's my why.
Yeah, but your why is justifiable. Hers is votes.
Sure.
They're different.
Regardless of that, I will say she's the only premier who's actually now said that she's going to create an actual oversight body. We'll see what actually happens with that. Where are the other premiers? Where is everyone else in this? And why is she the only one who's standing up so far? So, you know what? Like, I totally agree that anyone could have got on board, and I wish that she got on board sooner, because it does seem like they are one of the more strict provinces against medical assistance in dying. And this is why we have seen numerous cases of people like that 30-day injunction that was put in place to stop that woman. She came from Alberta, and the MV case that we're talking about is in Alberta. And so it is concerning when people are leaving your province to go to another province. You know, I don't know the stats on it, but you know, we are on the levels of, like, do you know, like, percentage province by province? Because I know Quebec is around 7% of all deaths are
7.3.
7.3 for Quebec. Yeah. So is Ontario's second?
So Quebec is number one. Ontario is second. Ontario is not only second. From 2018 to 2023, 25% of all euthanasia providing doctors are in Ontario. And just to specify Alberta itself has reported in 2024 alone 1,116 reported assisted deaths, which was up from 15% from 977 in 2023 and 836 in 2022 and 594 in 2021. All time she has been premier, at least for one extra year of that. And we do know this, and I am okay with saying this, that she was aware of the WV and MV case. And there was an ability there to kind of stop that. But what I want to understand, number one, is why is the Ontario premier not speaking up, and the British Columbia and the Quebec? And I'll tell you why. Because in Ontario, there was a report that came out from the Ontario MAiD Death Review Committee. So forgive me when I say that I'm not really trusting of these committees, because Ontario has its own separate review committee. And here's what they have found. Over 428 of those MAiD deaths were deemed non-compliant Ontario euthanasia deaths from 2018 to 2023, which means over 400 humans were deemed non-compliant, and yet none of those doctors who are on those death certificates are having anything happen to them.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, and if anyone wants to dig deeper on this, Alan Rakin's investigative report broke down specifically all of the details of that. And many of the cases were just like incorrect paperwork submitted for sure. But there was one instance of the wrong medication being administered. So like, what's happening to this doctor?
Like,
everyone's like, oh, minor details. We'll deal with it because we have oversight over our own doctors.
Yeah.
It's unfathomable to even consider this. Like, I know, Kelsey, I used this example in the first time we met when I was on your podcast, but you know, previously I was an interior designer. I've now retired, and I'm to do advocacy work full time. I'm writing a book, and but imagine if I designed a building and then said, oh, it's great. Yeah, I checked it. Yeah, my business partner, yeah, she looked at it. It's great. It's going to be totally fine. Just, yeah, go ahead, trust me, and build it. And then the building falls down because I'm not a structural engineer. I have a basic understanding, but I'm not a specialist. You know, that's exactly what's happening with medical assistance in dying, is that the doctors are saying, oh, well, we had someone independent review. Well, it's just another doctor, and they're not a specialist in that. And it's still under the same health authority. There's no third party review to look at this before the person dies. There is an oversight body that looks at it after they die. But even
They're
then, and also they're dead. So what would you do even if you did find that they were non-compliant, as what happened, like Alex Rakin uncovered? But
Yep.
but furthermore, it's still governed by the same authority. Like, we went to the MAiD oversight unit to try to go around Fraser Health to get my mom's assessment records, and they said, well, we're actually still under the umbrella of Fraser Health, so we have to stand by their decision to do it. They are still being reviewed by the same governing body, which is just like absolutely unacceptable. We have other government systems in place, such as building structures, where there is a third party review before the building is built, so that it doesn't fall down afterwards and we go, oh shit, cover that one up.
I hate that I'm lying, but it's so egregious and it's so very obvious that's why I get so cranky when people utilize this, like in our government, to get attention to do these things. I understand. I'm proud of you for standing up. It took a long time, but high five, we did it. But your review committees have direct correlations to the largest pro-death cult, Dying with Dignity. Your review committees, the majority of them are made up by people that promote euthanasia. So do we really think somebody's going to be impartial? Truly? Because we don't care who's on the boards and the review committees. And that's been made very clear that over 80% of one of these has been associated with dying with dignity. And like, when you look at the hypocrisy is what gets me, Alicia. It's like, I can high five you, but I'm also going to hold your feet to the fire and go, you knew about this before. Yeah. You knew. You're compliant if you knew. See, this is the coaching thing. Once it becomes conscious, this is the finish line. You've been consciously aware. So why haven't you done anything about it? And people could say, well, people are busy. Okay, so now you're aware. Let's make you aware of the donors. Let's make you aware then. Okay, so there's 65 pages on Dying with Dignity's 2023 report. And some of the top individuals who drive the societal conversation on Google Ads, on Bell, who has a Bell Let's Talk Day, which is supposed to support mental health. Bell is one of their largest donors. Google Ad, Toronto Airport Authority. Why are you donating to Dying with Dignity? What about the Alberta Nurses Association? How about your Healthcare Excellence Canada? What about the Hospice Greater St. John's or Microsoft? What about Rogers? What about TELUS, United Way, or Vancouver Island Mental Health Facility? Aren't you all supposed to be people that are promoting mental health? So why are you donating to the largest pro-death organization in the country? I'm sorry. So when I get cranky about her, I get cranky about it all because it's all called hypocrisy.
I think that it's so wrapped up in everything that we do. They talk about, making sure that a person hasn't been coerced, but the doctors bringing up MAiD in the first place is actually a form of coercion and persuasion.
I love that.
And so I just think that there's so many contradictions in the laws and how the doctors are moving through this. And I think we just need to keep shining light on everything that's happening and keep putting pressure on the politicians, because that's what we've been doing. This is how we've got it to this point where we have been pushing back the laws, because I think the politicians are afraid that they're going to lose the support from their contingencies. And that's our job. That's what we can do. Every single person can do their job, and they can push this. They can call their MPs. They can say, I don't support an MP that supports medical assistance in dying and essentially is killing vulnerable people that lack adequate housing, that are disabled. It's easier to get death in Canada than it is to get a wheelchair. Yeah. This is Canada we're talking about.
Yeah. We're now the poster children for the globe on how to do this wrong. The fact that we see, like, and you and I had this kind of like morality question on text message last night. You're like, well, what about if it was just outside the healthcare? I'm gonna argue that tooth and nail. No, we are not equipped. Nobody should ever be telling anybody if they should have the right to live or die. Because I'll tell you why. Because Amanda and I had this conversation, right? Because like, let me just give you an example, and we can argue about this on another episode. But like, what if we just said, so like say 10 people are born with cerebral palsy. Okay, say 10. And the standard of care that is brought forward is 9 out of 10 people with cerebral palsy use euthanasia. How does it make that one who wants to stand up and say, I want to live, feel?
Yeah.
If the standard of care and is normalized, and the normalized conversation is, yeah, but everybody else just uses it. It's like the vaccine conversation during COVID. People like me were ostracized. We're told we were killing grandma because we didn't want to put an experimental vaccine in us. You're a bad person. So what about the person who has a disability? And the normalized standard of care is, well, you get euthanized. So how dare you survive? What are we telling the people who want to live?
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And I guess like last night when we were texting about this conversation, it was that my concern is that euthanasia is so intertwined in our healthcare system right now. It's kind of what we were talking about before, that doctors are being trained, that they're being forced to talk about MAiD, and because people are so afraid. And so, you know, my thought was like, what if we could just take euthanasia out of healthcare? Doctors, I mean, it's a really simple procedure. Anyone can be trained to put a needle into someone. It is not a complicated, it's not, we are literally not talking about brain surgery here. I could be trained to do it.
A paramedic can do it.
Anyone can do it. Honestly, like my 17-year-old daughter could do it. We could, if we were able to remove this from the healthcare system, so doctors could be doctors, and doctors could continue to live by their Hippocratic oath that they took.
They don't have to take that anymore, by the way. I found out that's not true.
Okay. So,
yeah.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. Didn't know that one.
Ask Alex about that one.
Okay.
It's not a thing anymore.
Well, there goes my ADHD brain off on a tangent now.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Which could probably get me approved for MAiD. But imagine a healthcare system that actually took care of people. Just imagine that you didn't have to worry that you were going to be killed when you went to go see your doctor. And imagine we could remove that. And imagine that resources in our actual healthcare system could be put towards palliative care, true palliative care that ensures people have a pain-free death, because the advancement that has come along with this type of care is unbelievable. And I think people's number one fear, I shouldn't say number one, but one of the top fears about dying or having a terminal illness is the pain that they're going to suffer. And you don't have to worry about that anymore. The answer isn't euthanasia. You can still be allowed to have a natural death, pain-free, out within the healthcare system. And that doesn't need to be hastening death, you know?
Yeah.
So I guess that was what my argument was. What I would love if more resources could be put into healthcare, where someone like my mom didn't have to wait 18 months in Canada to see a specialist, where people could be, how it works is, you know, you go to the doctor, you've got an issue, they think, oh, it might be this. You wait a couple of months for a specialist, you go get tested, wasn't that, come back, and the next one, and the next one. And all of a sudden it's 18 months, you're living in unbearable suffering. And so the doctors don't know what to do with you. And so you die. Could you imagine just a system where you could access all of the specialists at once? You could get tested for a bunch of different things that the doctor thinks that it is, and maybe you figure out what it is in a timely manner, and then you're treated for it, and doctors aren't overburdened. I mean, I feel like I'm talking about some utopian world that can exist, but I don't know how to make this happen, but I know that that's what I would love to see happen. And the theory of euthanasia, I'm not even opposed to, but communism in theory is really beautiful too.
Of course it is. And that's why, because of humans, the way the ego works in ideology, right? That's why it can't, like, we are not advanced. Like we are not advanced enough to remove the ego, the control, the power over another human. We're not ready for this. No, nobody is ready to take a life. And I'll say this only because I've done it.
Yeah.
Nobody is ready to take a life, and nobody will ever be ready to take a life unless you are a sociopath, and you will never enjoy it. I don't care if the person's a bad person, because it's not like I did it in Canada. But, you know, anybody who says terms like Ellen, like it's euphoric and the most beautiful work she'll ever do, you'll never convince me that that person's mentally stable. And I think, moreover than not, my personal view is euthanasia is a symptom of a very, very sick society, a society that has lost its way. And it's not only lost its way, it's getting increasingly worse. And I think it's going to take people like you to stand up and be uncomfortable and literally throw the rest of everything you do away in order to stop something. And like I said to Amanda this morning, this merry band of weirdos we have here, it doesn't take many. It didn't take many to save a lot of people in the war. It didn't take many to have a resistance that stands up. It just takes a few.
Yeah.
It really does. And so in saying that, this won't be the last time. You're a part of the series. I'm glad we've got the update, but my girl, we have come a long, long way.
We have. I am really proud of us since the first time we spoke. Being approved for mental illness alone has been tabled until 2027, and it would have actually been law now. And can you imagine how many hundreds of thousands of people could possibly be dead by now? And, you know, I am a lighthouse in the media, and people have been able to find me, and I am like you. I don't think that I am the smartest person in the room, but I know the smartest people in the room, and I know how to connect people. So if you have a loved one, and that you're concerned that they've applied, call me, message me. You can find my information online, in memory of donnafaith.com, aliciaduncan.com. I'm happy to talk anytime, and we will win this war. We will. Yeah,
like I said, light always wins.
Light always wins. I believe that. I believe that. Yes.
We'll put all of those links for everyone to find you, and don't hesitate to reach out to her. She means it when she says it. She's done it before. I've seen her do it a million times, and she'll continue to do it until the day she dies. I think this is just this woman's new path, and I am grateful to walk alongside you and everybody else. Like I say at the end of all of these episodes, it's heavy. I'm aware. So go do yourself a favor. Go hug a loved one. Call somebody you haven't spoken to a while. Go take a minute to yourself. Go sit. Go breathe in the nose for 4 and out for 6. And remember, the world's not falling. It's just planes. The sky is not going to collapse. It's all going to be okay. As long as we stick together, we move forward as one, and we no longer allow these people to take our loved ones. Everyone else, you stick with me. I will see you all next week.